The Master of the World by Jules Verne. Chapter 4. A Meeting of the Automobile Club. Was the mystery of the Great Eyrie to be solved some day by chances beyond our imagining? That was known only to the future. And was the solution a matter of the first importance? That was beyond doubt, since the safety of the people of Western Carolina perhaps depended upon it. Yet a fortnight after my return to Washington, public attention was wholly distracted from this problem by another very different in nature, but equally astonishing. Toward the middle of that month of May, the newspapers of Pennsylvania informed their readers of some strange occurrences in different parts of the state. On the roads which radiated from Philadelphia, the chief city, there circulated an extraordinary vehicle, of which no one could describe the form, or the nature, or even the size, so rapidly did it rush past. It was an automobile, all were agreed on that, but as to what motor drove it, only imagination could say, and when the popular imagination is aroused, what limit is there to its hypotheses? At that period the most improved automobiles, whether driven by steam, gasoline, or electricity, could not accomplish much more than 60 miles an hour, a speed that the railroads, with their most rapid expresses, scarce exceed on the best lines of America and Europe. Now this new automobile which was astonishing the world traveled at more than double this speed. It is needless to add that such a rate constituted an extreme danger on the high roads, as much so for vehicles as for pedestrians. This rushing mass, coming like a thunderbolt, preceded by a formidable rumbling, caused a whirlwind which tore the branches from the trees along the road, terrified the animals browsing in adjoining fields, and scattered and killed the birds, which could not resist the suction of the tremendous air currents engendered by its passage. And a bizarre detail to which the newspapers drew particular attention: the surface of the roads was scarcely even scratched by the wheels of the apparition, which left behind it no such ruts as are usually made by heavy vehicles. At most there was a light touch, a mere brushing of the dust. It was only the tremendous speed which raised behind the vehicle such whirlwinds of dust. "It is probable," commented the New York Herald, "that the extreme rapidity of motion destroys the weight." Naturally there were protests from all sides. It was impossible to permit the mad speed of this apparition which threatened to overthrow and destroy everything in its passage, equipages and people. But how could it be stopped? No one knew to whom the vehicle belonged, nor whence it came, nor whither it went. It was seen but for an instant as it darted forward like a bullet in its dizzy flight. How could one seize a cannon ball in the air as it leaped from the mouth of the gun? I repeat, there was no evidence as to the character of the propelling engine. It left behind it no smoke, no steam, no odor of gasoline or any other oil. It seemed probable, therefore, that the vehicle ran by electricity, and that its accumulators were of an unknown model, using some unknown fluid. The public imagination, highly excited, readily accepted every sort of rumor about this mysterious automobile. It was said to be a supernatural car. It was driven by a spectre, by one of the chauffeurs of hell, a goblin from another world, a monster escaped from some mythological menagerie. In short, the devil in person, who could defy all human intervention, having at his command invisible and infinite satanic powers. But even Satan himself had no right to run at such a speed over the roads of the United States without a special permit, without a number on his car, and without a regular license. And it was certain that not a single municipality had given him permission to go 200 miles an hour. Public security demanded that some means be found to unmask the secret of this terrible chauffeur. Moreover, it was not only Pennsylvania that served as the theater of his sportive eccentricities. The police reported his appearance in other states: in Kentucky near Frankfort, in Ohio near Columbus, in Tennessee near Nashville, in Missouri near Jefferson, and finally in Illinois in the neighborhood of Chicago. The alarm having been given, it became the duty of the authorities to take steps against this public danger. To arrest or even to halt an apparition moving at such a speed was scarcely practicable. A better way would be to erect across the roads solid gateways with which the flying machine must come in contact sooner or later and be smashed into 1,000 pieces. "Nonsense!" declared the incredulous. "This madman would know well how to circle around such obstructions." "And if necessary," added others, "the machine would leap over the barriers." "And if he is indeed the devil, he has, as a former angel, presumably preserved his wings, and so he will take to flight." But this last was but the suggestion of foolish old gossips who did not stop to study the matter. For if the king of Hades possessed a pair of wings, why did he obstinately persist in running around on the earth at the risk of crushing his own subjects, when he might more easily have hurled himself through space as free as a bird? Such was the situation when, in the last week of May, a fresh event occurred, which seemed to show that the United States was indeed helpless in the hands of some unapproachable monster. And after the New World, would not the Old in its turn be desecrated by the mad career of this remarkable automobilist? The following occurrence was reported in all the newspapers of the Union, and with what comments and outcries it is easy to imagine. A race was to be held by the Automobile Club of Wisconsin over the roads of that state of which Madison is the capital. The route laid out formed an excellent track, about 200 miles in length, starting from Prairie du Chien on the western frontier, passing by Madison, and ending a little above Milwaukee on the borders of Lake Michigan. Except for the Japanese road between Nikko and Namode, bordered by giant cypresses, there is no better track in the world than this of Wisconsin. It runs straight and level as an arrow for sometimes 50 miles at a stretch. Many and noted were the machines entered for this great race. Every kind of motor vehicle was permitted to compete, even motorcycles as well as automobiles. The machines were of all makes and nationalities. The sum of the different prizes reached $50,000, so that the race was sure to be desperately contested. New records were expected to be made. Calculating on the maximum speed hitherto attained, of perhaps 80 miles an hour, this international contest covering 200 miles would last about 3 hours. And to avoid all danger, the state authorities of Wisconsin had forbidden all other traffic between Prairie du Chien and Milwaukee during 3 hours on the morning of the 30th of May. Thus, if there were any accidents, those who suffered would be themselves to blame. There was an enormous crowd, and it was not composed only of the people of Wisconsin. Many thousands gathered from the neighboring states of Illinois, Michigan, Iowa, Indiana, and even from New York. Among the sportsmen assembled were many foreigners, English, French, Germans, and Austrians, each nationality, of course, supporting the chauffeurs of its land. Moreover, as this was the United States, the country of the greatest gamblers of the world, bets were made of every sort and of enormous amounts. The start was to be made at 8 o'clock in the morning, and to avoid crowding and the accidents which must result from it, the automobiles were to follow each other at 2-minute intervals along the roads whose borders were black with spectators. The first 10 racers, numbered by lot, were dispatched between 8 o'clock and 20 minutes past. Unless there was some disastrous accident, Some of these machines would surely arrive at the goal by 11 o'clock. The others followed in order. An hour and a half had passed. There remained but a single contestant at Prairie du Chien. Word was sent back and forth by telephone every 5 minutes as to the order of the racers. Midway between Madison and Milwaukee, the lead was held by a machine of Renault Brothers, 4-cylindered, of 20 horsepower, and with Michelin tires. It was closely followed by a Harvard-Watson car and by a Dion Bouton. Some accidents had already occurred. Other machines were hopelessly behind. Not more than a dozen would contest the finish. Several chauffeurs had been injured, but not seriously. And even had they been killed, the death of men is but a detail, not considered of great importance in that astonishing country of America. Naturally, the excitement became more intense as one approached the finishing line near Milwaukee. There was assembled the most curious, the most interested, and there the passions of the moment were unchained. By 10 o'clock it was evident that the first prize, $20,000, lay between 5 machines, 2 American, 2 French, and 1 English. Imagine, therefore, the fury with which bets were being made under the influence of national pride. The regular bookmakers could scarcely meet the demands of those who wished to wager. Offers and amounts were hurled from lip to lip with feverish rapidity. 1-3 on the Harvard-Watson. 1-2 on the Dion Bouton. Even money on the Renault. These cries rang along the line of spectators at each new announcement from the telephones. Suddenly, at 9:30 by the town clock of Prairie du Chien, 2 miles beyond that town was heard a tremendous noise and a rumbling which proceeded from the midst of a flying cloud of dust, accompanied by shrieks like those of a naval siren. Scarcely had the crowds time to draw to one side to escape a destruction which would have included hundreds of victims. The cloud swept by like a hurricane. No one could distinguish what it was that passed with such speed. There was no exaggeration in saying that its rate was at least 150 miles an hour. The apparition passed and disappeared in an instant, leaving behind it a long train of white dust, as an express locomotive leaves behind a train of smoke. Evidently it was an automobile with a most extraordinary motor. If it maintained this arrow-like speed, it would reach the contestants in the forefront of the race. It would pass them with this speed double their own. It would arrive first at the goal. And then from all parts arose an uproar as soon as the spectators had nothing more to fear. "It is that infernal machine!" "Yes, the one the police cannot stop." "But has not been heard of for a fortnight." "But it was supposed to be done for, destroyed, gone forever." "It is a devil's car, driven by hellfire, and with Satan driving." In truth, if he were not the devil, who could this mysterious chauffeur be, driving with this unbelievable velocity his no less mysterious machine? At least it was beyond doubt that this was the same machine which had already attracted so much attention. If the police believed that they had frightened it away, that it was never to be heard of more, well, the police were mistaken, which happens in America as elsewhere. The first stunned moment of surprise having passed, many people rushed to the telephones to warn those further along the route of the danger which menaced, not only the people, but also the automobiles scattered along the road. When this terrible madman arrived like an avalanche, they would be smashed to pieces, ground into powder, annihilated. And from the collision might not the destroyer himself emerge safe and sound? He must be so adroit, this chauffeur of chauffeurs. He must handle his machine with such perfection of eye and hand, that he knew, no doubt, how to escape from every situation. Fortunately, the Wisconsin authorities had taken such precautions that the road would be clear except for contesting automobiles. But what right had this machine among them? And what said the racers themselves, who, warned by telephone, had to sheer aside from the road in their struggle for the grand prize? By their estimate, this amazing vehicle was going at least 130 miles an hour. Fast as was their speed, it shot by them at such a rate that they could hardly make out even the shape of the machine, a sort of lengthened spindle, probably not over 30 feet long. Its wheels spun with such velocity that they could scarce be seen. For the rest, the machine left behind it neither smoke nor scent. As for the driver, hidden in the interior of his machine, he had been quite invisible. He remained as unknown as when he had first appeared on the various roads throughout the country. Milwaukee was promptly warned of the coming of this interloper. Fancy the excitement the news caused! The immediate purpose agreed upon was to stop this projectile, to erect across its route an obstacle against which it would smash into 1,000 pieces. But was there time? Would not the machine appear at any moment? And what need was there, since the track ended on the edge of Lake Michigan, and so the vehicle would be forced to stop there anyway, unless its supernatural driver could ride the water as well as the land? Here, also, as all along the route, the most extravagant suggestions were offered. Even those who would not admit that the mysterious chauffeur must be Satan in person allowed that he might be some monster escaped from the fantastic visions of the Apocalypse. And now there were no longer minutes to wait. Any second might bring the expected apparition. It was not yet 11 o'clock when a rumbling was heard far down the track, and the dust rose in violent whirlwinds. Harsh whistlings shrieked through the air, warning all to give passage to the monster. It did not slacken speed at the finish. Lake Michigan was not half a mile beyond, and the machine must certainly be hurled into the water. Could it be that the mechanician was no longer master of his mechanism? There could be little doubt of it. Like a shooting star, the vehicle flashed through Milwaukee. When it had passed the city, would it plunge itself to destruction in the waters of Lake Michigan? At any rate, when it disappeared at a slight bend in the road, no trace was to be found of its passage. End of chapter.